and the way of peace have they not known? There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before God. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall be no flesh.
Morning, mate.
Morning, sir.
Stand easy.
Thank you, sir.
I said stand easy, don't sit down.
Sorry, sir.
Why aren't you in the bottom field with your mates?
Twisted my ankle, sir.
Here's a lucky boy. Right. Sit down and carry on with your Bible.
Thank you, sir. Sir, what's it like? What's it like up the line?
It's the path to glory, son. It's the path to glory.
No, really, sir. See, my cousin had to come home after Lou's lost his leg, you know.
Well, it's war, son. It's a bloody dangerous thing.
Of course, sir, but no, what I mean is that my dad as well, he was in South Africa, Colenso, during the Black Week. No, what I mean is my cousin, well, the leg and all, but it's not just the leg. He's changed. It's like he's broken. My mum said that my dad was the same way after he came back. He said it took years before he was right again, you know. So what I want to know is, what's it really like, you know, actually, like, not the bullshit poster version that got us all here, the real story. You know, I was stationed in India, so to tell you the truth, sir, I've never actually been over the line.
I've seen it happen. Your father and your cousin, I mean. Are you sure you want to know what it's like, son?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, it's horrible. And it goes on being horrible. And just when you don't think it can get any more horrible, it does. But you'll be all right. You'll be all right. Do as you're told, and you'll be all right. When you're ordered to go forward, you go forward. When you're ordered to stay put, you stay put. Right? Because if you don't, they'll shoot you.
Well, I know that the Huns will try to shoot at me, sir.
No. Well, yes. But no. What I mean is, if you disobey an order at the front, then one of your officers may shoot you, or an NCO, come to that. If you're ordered to go forward and you don't go forward, or you're ordered to stay put, you don't stay put, they can shoot you.
You mean to say that if it came to it, you'd shoot me?
Well, I take no joy in it, son, but I would, yes. Right? You look at it from my point of view, right? I've got you with wind up, and I've got all my other lads there, right? Okay? It's infectious, all right? They see you, they might go the same way. And I can't send you home, can I? Because if I send you home, I've got to send all them home. And if I send them home, we haven't got an army. And if we haven't got an army, we can't win the war, can we?
No, sir. But, sir, what if I can't take it?
Can't take what?
I don't know. Any of it, all of it. You know, the guns, the bodies, the shouting, the screaming, you know, blood.
Don't forget the stink, son. Smells like a Valletta whore after the fleet's been in for a week. Look, right? If you disobey an order up there, right, they can shoot you, right? Or you'll be placed under arrest and sent for court-martial. And then do you know what'll happen?
No.
Right, you'll be taken into a long, dark room, and at the other end of the room, there'll be a table. And there'll be 3 officers sat at the end of it, right? And the one in the middle will have a bit of gold braid round the top, right? And he'll talk to you, and he'll talk a lot of gibberish that you won't understand, son, right? What you will understand is that at some point, he'll take his hat off, he'll reach into his pocket, and he'll pull out a black hanky, and he'll put it on his head, and he'll sentence you to death. And then, while you're getting conniptions, 2 big burly bastard redcaps will come in, one under each arm, and they'll drag you out, and they'll stick you against the wall, and they'll send your mates to shoot you. Right? I've seen it happen.
But what if at the court-martial the MO says that I'm not up to it?
The MO won't be there.
But he might be at the
No,
court-martial.
the MO won't be there. The MO won't be there. Do you think they're going to send an MO from up the line up to his bloody neck in wounded heroes because you've got a case of wind up? No, of course they bloody won't. Of course they won't. And quite apart from anything else, right, even if he does see you've had enough, what the bleed hell do you think he's going to do about it? Do you think he's going to put a big black bastard mark on his copybook with a CO for you? No, he won't, son. He'll sling you a couple of pills and he'll mark you fit for duty and send you back off to the slaughter.
No, but what if I'm not okay and I get killed?
Well, then the MO's done his job, hasn't he? And so have you.
But what, even worse, what if I get a mate killed, okay?
Well, then your mate's done his job.
What if I just run away?
Well, then we'll catch you.
Well, then at least I'll just have to go to prison.
No, you won't. They'll shoot you.
They didn't put any of this on the fucking posters, okay?
Nor would they. Nor would they. Why would they put it on the posters? We wouldn't get brave young heroes like you signing up. But, poster or no, they'll still shoot you. We are all scared. Right? All of us. Right? Every time we get on that train or on the back of that lorry, right, and we head up there, we're all scared. Right? I've shit my drawers more than once. Right? And the man who tells you he ain't scared and the man who ain't shit his drawers is a fool or a bloody liar.
Even the officers.
Well, the officers shit themselves, but of course the officers' shit don't stink. Holding the King's Commission does strange things to a man's bowels. Look, it's like this, right? Inside of all of us, right? Imagine there's like a bucket in here, right? You've got one too in there, right? And all the horrible things we're asked to do, and all the horrible things we see, and we say and we hear, all goes to fill up that bucket, see? Right? Okay? And the bucket gets more and more full, and then when it gets to the top, it starts to brim over, and that's when you get your problems, right? You don't want problems, so what do? You empty your bucket, right? How do you empty your bucket, Sergeant Major, I hear you say? Right? Well, you talk. You talk to your mates. You can't talk to your poor old mum, can you? Right? And you can't talk to your sweetheart back at home. They'd have fucking conniptions. They'd never sleep again if they knew 1% of what went on up there. Right? So you've got your mates. You talk to your mates. And you hope you can bail that bucket out faster than it can fill up. Right? Okay? Now, there are those that say you can empty your bucket with rum. And I've seen them. I've seen them up the front. Scared shitless. Nicking the rum, running around and getting themselves into all types of bleeding situations, mainly killed, to be fair. And then back here, you've got the RAMC, you've got the old pill slingers, right? And they're at the bloody morphine and the opium, right? It don't do any good, son, right? You can't blank it out. You've got to empty your bucket by talking. That's the secret, right? You'll be all right, lad.
But what if I can't empty my bucket out, sir? Sir, what if I won't be okay? Sir, please.
Morning. My name is Jamie Sanderson. I'm the welfare director and one of the founders of an organisation called Rock to Recovery. We're a community interest company that works with charities, helping them help coach the guys that they're dealing with that are suffering with stress, the ones that have got the full bucket. and we've been doing that for the last couple of years. Prior to that, I was a sergeant in the Royal Marines, where I'd served for 18 years, and I got to do everything I wanted to do as a Marine. I early on in my career qualified as a sniper, and I got to do everything that I thought I wanted to do as a sniper. And I had a great career. I don't regret anything in that career, and if I could do it all again, I'd probably do it exactly the same. Did I enjoy all of it? 99.9% of it I did. Which means there was something left and that I wasn't happy with, and that came about in 2006. And by 2013, I was medically discharged from the Royal Marines with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress, an anxiety disorder, chronic fatigue, lower back injuries that I picked up in theatre, which weren't too dramatic, a concussion that I'd had to the head had added to the confusion, I think, and some hearing loss and severe tinnitus in my left ear, which I think are all relevant to the stress factor also. I'm going to talk to you today from the heart and not from notes. Other than it being unprofessional and not looking good when someone reads from notes out front, there's a reason for it. I've only really just found out why that reason is. So I was giving a brief to my team recently, and I found myself, I was getting my words wrong, I was missing lines, I was getting the grammar wrong, I was missing sentences, I was rereading things, and then something happened in here. My stomach started to play up, and I started to get tunnel vision, my hearing went down, and the fingers went clammy. Put your hand up if you know that feeling. Great, I'm not on my own, just checking. Okay, and our head of coaching was in the room, this guy sat over here, Malcolm Williams, and he said to me, "How do you feel whilst you're reading out loud?" And I said, well, I explained what I just said, and then in good coaching form, the next thing he asked me was, "When did you first start feeling like that?" And I got it straight away. I knew what he meant, and I knew where he wanted to go. But it was only when I was prompted, I realized what he was talking about. He was talking about when I was at school, so I was a child, really. I grew up in Yorkshire, in the son of a trawlerman in the North Sea. I spent my childhood rolling around in the North Sea in the dark, in a lot of anxious situations. Thought that was going to be my future. That was the family business, and I was going to go into that. It was only late in the 90s, late in the 80s. Bloody hell. It was late in the 80s that I realized that that wasn't going to happen because the government had changed the way fishing was working out, and etc. So I was sent off to the Army Careers Office, the Army Careers Office. And I thought about being at school and why I was now struggling with reading out loud, if I related it back to school, which is where I first felt that anxiety. And it was because I was in a class predominantly full of girls, in actual fact. So when I actually looked and studied and thought about why did I even go to school, what got me out of bed in the morning to go to school, it was girls. That was the reason I went to school. I was slightly overweight, I was self-conscious, I was one of only a few blokes in the class. So when my extremely attractive English teacher used to stand me up to read the next page of the book out loud to all the girls that were looking at me, sniggering, smiling, the stomach went, the fingers went clammy, and I started to feel and learn to feel what anxiety is. So that's where it began for me. And like I say, I had a great childhood, very active, unlike my kids now. And that brought some anxiety issues with it. It brought some incidents, some accidents, some trauma, the broken arm that you hardly ever see anymore. I fell out the tree. I fell in the North Sea. I did all kinds of crazy stuff, which had all stuck with me, and I hadn't realized it. I then, as I say, I went off to join the military, because it was the advice that I was given from my dad. This business is going downhill. Go and try that. So I went off to the Army Careers Office, and I walked in, and I met a little short bloke. Nothing against little short blokes, but he was short. I know there's a little short Royal Marine in here today that's going to laugh at that. And I walked in, the first thing he said to me was, all right, Royal. And I was a 16-year-old kid. The next thing he did is he gave me a handful of change and sent me to the shop to get his lunch. So I hadn't even spoke yet. I turned around and walked out, and I was buying this guy a pot pie and a bag of cheese onion crisps. But I knew I was in now. I knew I was in the Marines. That was it. I liked this guy. I was getting his lunch, for God's sake, so I was in. So I joined the Royal Marines. Training as a recruit, it turns out it was a stressful thing for me, okay? There was events that I'll come back to in a second that happened in training as they try and push the envelope and get you as near to combat experience as they can, that actually added to my anxiety levels. But because it wasn't war at the time, oh, this can't be real. This can't be real fear. This can't be fear or danger because it's not war, because that's what you're building up to. There's lots of other little incidents that I won't go into because we'll be here all day. So, I mean, briefly, I was run over by a car when I was younger. I was in an airplane that had an emergency landing, which seemed like fun and games at the time. I was assaulted, and growing up in Yorkshire, being a Man United fan near Leeds as a kid, meant that you got a lot of kickings. All right, so all of those went into my subconscious. They were there, they were getting stored. The hard drive was starting to get filled up throughout my life. And I'm bringing you up to date to the most traumatic and the most stress-involving period of my life, which was when being a Marine in the last 10 years, if you like, 10, 15 years, meant that you were going to go and do something operational. You were going to get shot at. People were going to try and kill you. And you were going to, in the beginning, feel like this young man did, and then later on, start to understand what the RSM was talking about. And that's taken me 11 years to understand, okay? So the height of my career, if you like, if you can call it a height, as a sniper in the Royal Marines, in a place some of you out here will probably know, the Sangin Valley in 2006 and 2007, right at the kind of the start of the most recent scrap, if you like. It was a busy place to be, and it was demanding. I'm going to quickly ask, who's got some combat experience in the room? And I obviously don't want you to go into it, but just a show of hands, who's got? So we've got maybe, let's say, about 20 people, okay, out of the room, which is great. But what I want to try and do is very quickly is give the people that haven't an idea of what that means. And I thought about this when I was giving another talk, and I thought, how do I give that? How do I give people that don't know what I'm talking about, this young man, how do I give him a taste of that? So I asked them, who's been involved, and again, I don't want you to regress, but who's been in a car accident, or seen one, been close to one, driven past one? So we've now, everyone in the room's pretty much had their hand up, okay? And I want you to quickly think of that, either the combat or that, and you'll know that there's a feeling in here that comes with it, right? And it's not a great feeling, it's shock. And it's start of an inducement of stress that will stay with you in your subconscious for the rest of your life, okay? That car crash, imagine doing that car crash today. You survive, you go home, you have the hot sweet tea, you talk about it with your partner, your friends, whoever, and then you have to get up the next day and go back to work. So I'm going to get the train tomorrow, that's what you think. But imagine if you weren't allowed to get the train, you were told you're not going to get a train, you're going to get back in your car, we'll get you another car, and you're going to come to work in the car. No, I don't feel ready, but okay, I get it. So you go to work the next day in your car. Okay. The next day, after that, so nothing happened, it was fine. The next day you get up and you're feeling a bit happier, you go to, and you set off back on the road and you're out there driving back to work. Bang. Something hits you. Back to that, you go back to that car crash that you had the first time. Okay, very quickly then, imagine doing that for every day, not knowing if there was going to be a car crash for 6 months, 7 months, weekends, nights, days. And let's say that you can guarantee you will have 2, maybe 3 car crashes in that 7-day week of some sort. And whenever you get home at night, you close the door and you sit down and you're relaxing, all right? Somebody then drives a truck into the side of your house. You get that again. Because they won't let you rest, all right? So that describes combat for a fighting unit in a place like Afghanistan over the last 10 years. That's where I saw grown men. I'm going to tell you a secret, actually. I wasn't going to, but that's where I, as a grown man, wet myself. All right? There was a container, shipping container, that was hard cover, and I used to go in it on a night, and the feeling of being back in the womb, if you like, safe, I would relax to a point where I wet myself. I knew that wasn't right, and I thought I was on my own. And one night, in the dark, I couldn't even see my hand in front of me. I was leaving the container, and I bumped into a mate, literally hit him. And only by his accent, I recognized who it was. And I thought, mate, what are you doing? Oh, mate, I come in here every night. What do you come in here for? I usually wet myself. And I was like, brilliant. I'm not on my own. Thank God for that. So how did I get to that level of stress, actually on the deployment? Okay. There was 5 things, and foolishly, I labeled them the big 5. And by labeling them, I cemented them a little bit for quite a long time. There was 5 events I'm going to give you, and again, not to cause any trauma now or any memories, but I just want you to know what I went through and how it reflected in my emotions later. So the first one was getting mortared. So living in an environment miles from the safety, if you like, of any support other than the air, because nothing could move around on roads. And I won't say daily, but maybe 2 or 3 times a week, you would just get a bombardment from the air of bombs would just come in and land around you. And the closest one would have landed in this same room, if I'm honest. That is a really anxious thing to live with. Okay, it really, really creates fear. And fear manifested and it stayed with me, and I actually became fearful while I was out there. So a lot of people become ill with stress later. For me, it started out there. I had a real problem with things falling from the sky and hitting me. The second thing was us firing back with the same intensity. We had the use of artillery and aircraft, and we could fire onto the enemy in the same way. And as a sniper, there was an occasion where I set up a shoot, and we bombarded an area, an enemy position, with enemy weapons. I'd started it, I directed and I adjusted the artillery, and we blew this piece of land to pieces. But as a sniper, I was left to watch the dust settle, and I saw what came out of the dust. And it upset me. I was a father. And that stuck with me in the form of guilt. So this was the start of guilt for me. There was then shooting. If you imagine a sniper, everyone imagines he does a lot of shooting and shoots people. Well, he does. And it's easier than you think, especially under that pressure. Because if you don't do it first, they'll do it anyway. And most of the time, you're reacting because they've done it already, and you have to stop the situation. But it didn't fit with me as a person, and only later on I realized that I actually didn't like shooting people. I didn't enjoy that. If I'd had a chance now, I would go back and I would help them. I would go out there. I wouldn't, because I wouldn't survive, but I would go out there, find him, and say, look, mate, what are you doing? Let's not shoot at each other. And I would help him, and I would get him back, and that's me. So that was personality. So I found that it just didn't suit my personality. I was in the wrong job, and I didn't know it. And we get shot at as well. And 2 people were shot dead in front of me in Afghanistan, and I was responsible for clearing them up, taking them away, and making sure they were dealt with respectfully. But they were 2 young lads. They were policemen, but they were not much older than my own kids. And that really hit me. You know, being the father, being in the wrong environment, and seeing that happen right in front of my eyes was a trauma. And then having to deal with them and say goodbye to them as I left them at the helicopter. I never knew these people, but it was something that really it stuck with me. It's seeing the casualty on the third lane when you drive past that accident. It just wasn't nice. And that face stayed with me. Faces, sorry, although they did both look the same, so I've only got one actually. We'll have to work on that. That stuck with me. And then the final thing, the big five, which I've now stopped calling the big five other than today, was a friend of mine. So I was injured in the last couple of weeks, mild injury, but it meant that I couldn't walk properly. I was in a lot of pain. I had to go back. And within 24 hours, I was back in the UK. And I left a firefight. I left a messy situation. And within 48 hours, I was in Edinburgh, actually, seeing a specialist. And that was a real quick return. In that 48 hours that I was flying and returning home, a friend of mine was killed. And he was killed in the ground that I had been protecting for the last 4 or 5 months. Guilt, again, hit me. Okay, I was now responsible for the mine going into the ground that had killed a friend of mine. That's how I felt. I was 5,000 miles away. But up until then, we'd been managing to stop mines going in. But this one got through, and I blame myself for it getting in. That's how it affected me. There's a big issue with guilt there, you can see. There's a big issue there with trauma and visual memories. And it stuck with me, and I had to leave. So in 2013, I was having lived like this, of ups and downs, anxiety, depression came about, and that was a whole new thing. And when that came about, they knew that it was likely to persist. You know, we'd been going on for a few years, and there's a good chance that you're going to stay with this. So I had to leave. So I had a year to sort my life out and decide what to do. So I started a clothing company, and all the lads knowing me, I was selling clothing to the military, to the MOD, and they were buying it. So within a year of my first year as a civilian, a business I was running was turning over a lot of money by taking money off the lads. And I just felt ill. It made me feel ill. And again, I believe now, and I understand this with the guilt. And I had a breakdown. The glass filled up. The glass was full. And nowhere in my life had I processed and tried to empty that glass at any stage. So I tried everything that was on offer. I followed all the clinical advice. I went to the doctors. I went to the psychology, psychiatry, medication. I tried everything. There was a couple of processes I was put through, CBT and EMDR, which I'm sure a lot of you in here understand and know all about, and they didn't work for me. I persisted for 4 years with EMDR, and when I explained to them that now this is an issue, coming to see you makes me anxious for 2 days, you take me through trauma, and I leave a wreck, and then I'm depressed for the next 3 days. That was nearly a week of my life every 2 weeks. The answer was, well, stop coming, and you're going to lose your job. So me being me, I wasn't happy with that. If there's nothing else, the doctors were all saying there's nothing else. In fact, I was told to go and learn to live with it. And I was still up and down. So I met this guy, Malcolm Williams, who's now our head of coaching, who did alternative stuff. He did one-to-one coaching with me, getting me to think about my thinking and think about how I was applying myself every day and think about my future. Stop looking in the rear-view mirror, which is what I was doing, and start looking out of the windscreen, and there's going to be less crashes, obviously. And we started to do that. And myself and Jason we both left at the same time for the same reasons almost. He'll talk a bit in a moment about that. And we found that there was other options. There was other ways of managing this, especially when you're being told to go and manage it for the rest of your life. So that's what you need to do. And we set up Rock to Recovery to offer that coaching to others. So it started with the two of us asking if Malcolm would help a friend of ours. We stopped a suicide. We thought if you can stop one suicide, you can stop another. And we continued to do it. The ethos behind Rock to Recovery is two things. It's get help, okay, it's the first thing. So this young man here, who's not experienced it yet, but I would probably want to talk to the RSM. Get help. And that help has to be working. If it's not working, it needs changing. And this is something that sometimes I see with clients that the clinical routes can forget and miss, is that they just want to persist with their options, okay? And there's nothing wrong with their options, they're great, if it works. You need to get help, and that help needs to be working. The second thing you need to be doing, and this I believe is almost entirely missed in the mental health world, is helping yourself. Helping yourself. If you won't get out of bed, if you won't physically take yourself to the shower and prepare for the day and physically go out there and hit the challenges and go back and follow the things that are working for you, if you won't do it, you will continue driving, looking in the rearview mirror. So this is what we do. We set up to influence and motivate and inspire our mates initially to get out of bed and go and sort it out. One of such clients I've got with us here today, I'm going to highlight him. Come out, Baz, because quickly come out. There's a reason for this. I just want to quickly put some emphasis on Baz. So Baz was severely injured in Afghanistan. And over the last year, we've worked with Baz. And we've gone from, and I know he doesn't mind me saying this, we've gone from the choice and the thoughts and the decisions of suicide, and we've coached him away from that to a point where now he's got a thriving business, IED training, networking later, everyone. And we've almost got a marriage proposal with you and the missus going on, haven't we? So, cheers, mate. So if you get an opportunity to speak to Baz later, I'd just like you to do that. That's all. It was part of his coaching to bring him here today. Okay, thank you. So very, very quickly to sum up, that's my journey. That's what I've been through. If you notice now, there's a reason I was doing this, because the glass was full, all right, and I filled it up with my life's long reference material of events that I've stored in my subconscious. I know this now, and I'm beginning to process them. And as I'm processing them and putting them down, I'm picking up what rock to recovery means, the things that make you get out of bed in the morning, okay? There's some science behind music, mountains, and water that have proven, and there's research ongoing, that they're the very things that people tend to lean to the most to stimulate the brain's self-recovery. So we're setting up a whole program around music, mountains, and water to make sure that these people that need to help themselves are doing it in the best possible option of a way. And as we were talking about this science at another university, I just happened to point out that I became a songwriter in this time. I thought I was the next Robbie Williams. I was massively wrong. But I thought, what if I could be? That's my new path, something creative. Brain was going wild. I learned to play the guitar. I started writing poetry. I put them together. I was writing songs, and I was living. I knew what I wanted to do tomorrow. There was a time when I had a rope around my neck in the garage. And now I was thinking, I'm going to write a song. I'm going to be Robbie Williams. I'm going to do this. And it was working in my brain. I was also a mountain, I'm not going to say mountaineer, because Baz is a high-end mountaineer, so I don't want to big time it in front of Baz, but I was a hill walker. He's a mountain leader, sorry. I was a hill walker, and I got taken on one of the most challenging hill walks, Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. And I got to the top of Kilimanjaro, and the message that I learned about myself, which helped me empty that almost instantly at 19,500 feet, whatever it is. The guide that took me up there, mountain leader Paul Mattin of Wilderness Solutions, another plug, he said to me, do you realize the one thing that got you to the top of this mountain this morning, which is mental strength, is, in fact, it's the only thing that got me to the top of that mountain that morning. It wasn't fizz, it wasn't my strength, my legs, because of the altitude, I was dead. It was my mental strength. The one thing that got me to the top of that mountain that morning was the one thing that I'd been told was broken. it wasn't broken, it was just hidden inside. And we believe that music, mountains, and water, Jason will talk to you about the water, are something, okay, that can grow that positive brain back. Thank you.
So yeah, Jason Fox, otherwise known as Foxy. What I'm going to do now, obviously, Jamie's done a really good job of painting a picture and drawing and basically explaining the analogies that he's just come up with. The looking in the rearview mirror, filling up the glass, and making a mega mess here as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the last, say, from 2001 up until sort of present time, my story, and talk about my journey and how I got involved with Jamie and Rock to Recovery. So just to retrack or go back a little bit, age 16, I joined the Royal Marines. I actually, before that, had a reasonably normal childhood, I'd say. It was quite happy. I just grew up in not a very decent area. I was getting myself into a lot of trouble, and I don't know how I had the presence of mind, or it was a subconscious decision that I needed to get myself out of that. And that's what I did. I joined the military. My old man, he was an ex-Royal Marine. I heard a few cool stories, and I thought that sounded like the life for me. The first 10 years of that career was spent pretty much traveling around the world, drinking lots, playing sport, and having a really, really good time. There was nothing really, I thought, that stressful. Probably the most stressful thing I'd done in that period was do Royal Marine Commando training, which was probably the first time I'd ever cried outside of being told off by my mum. So then what happened? Did 10 years in the Marines, and I thought it would be a great idea then to move on and join the Special Forces. I went on selection. That, again, then was the hardest thing I'd done. And I joined the Special Forces at a time when the world changed. It was, 9/11, 2001. That's when the world changed for a lot of, well, the planet really, but me especially. So I then go into a high-tempo organisation, the Special Boat Service, and my life was just non-stop. I was going on multiple tours. I did multiple tours of Afghanistan and Iraq predominantly, also served all around the globe. And I got involved in lots of stuff that I enjoyed. I enjoyed going on operations. I enjoyed being a part of something that I thought was amazing. I did believe in what I was doing at the time. And I was basically getting involved in all the boys' own stuff. I was doing cool stuff, which is what I wanted to do, and getting paid to do it. Now, throughout that period of time, I was a huge, huge non-believer in PTSD. I'd obviously heard people talking about it. I'd been on operations. I'd experienced stuff that these people were I'm not saying they're whinging, but that's what I thought at the time. And I just completely debunked the whole thing. Never entertained it one little bit. Anyway, it was around sort of the end of the 2000s. I was on my commander's course, which is a 3-week course for the guys in the Special Forces, and what you do is you learn about how to lead guys in the Special Forces. Midway through the first week, we get given a 45-minute presentation, and it's on sort of mental health issues and what we should be looking for in our men, and how to address that. Now, I literally sat at the back of the classroom, and I wouldn't have said I ignored it, but I wasn't interested. I was more interested. It wasn't going to help me pass the course. It was just something that, it was a box-ticking practice. So I took a little bit in and just moved on. Then went on my 5th tour of Afghanistan. It was an extremely high-tempo, hard operational tour. There was all sorts we were involved with: helicopter crashes, hostage rescues, the standard stuff that you get involved with in war fighting situations. Now, what happened was I came back from that tour, and looking back now, I can remember feeling quite detached from normal life. I'd gone out on a job one night. The lead team got hit by an IED. It wasn't fatal. There was a few minor injuries, but it was, it got the blood flowing, the juices flowing. Exactly what Jamie spoke about earlier, reference to car crashes. 15 hours later, I'm walking down Poole High Street, trying to shop, feeling complete, like on another planet. It just felt weird. That there was no real decompression. There was no opportunity for me to adjust. Now remember, I'm still thinking about PTSD as a load of crap. I don't believe in it. Then what happens is, about 8 months down the line, I'm starting my build-up training as a senior team leader within a squadron. So I've got a group of guys that are looking to me to be a ball of fire and to inspire them, that have just passed selection, that have just been in, just joined the Special Forces. They're looking at me to inspire them and lead them. And I know that we've got a tour in about 6 months' time coming up. And I just saw this tour. For some reason, I can remember the moment. I saw it as a black cloud, and it was this black cloud looming in the distance. And it's like, you're out during the day, it's a nice sunny day, see a black cloud and it's coming towards you, you can tell it's about to piss down, and you're like, oh God, I can't be arsed with that. And that's what it felt like to me, and it didn't feel right. And while we were doing lots of what we would call as boys cool stuff, going out, banging around in helicopters, abseiling out of them, fast roping out of them, whatever it is. And at the end of each serial, when I'm debriefing the guys, I just felt done. I could not be bothered with it. I couldn't be bothered about myself, and it was a feeling that was doing my head in, because I was doing a job that I wanted to do my whole life, and then all of a sudden, I just can't be bothered doing it, and it was the most confusing feeling ever. I sat down at home that night when I realised that feeling, and I had a word with myself, and I was like, look, this is not fair on those guys. I'm having to dig deep to find motivation for myself, let alone them. It's not fair on them. And more importantly, not being selfish, it's not fair on me. And everything in that, if you remember the 45-minute presentation I spoke about, the mental health issues that blokes might encounter, everything from that lecture, that presentation, suddenly came flooding back. So it was worth me listening to it, even though I didn't listen to it. I didn't think I was listening to it. And it came flooding back, and I suddenly remembered certain things. And I remember the lady that was in that presentation, one of the people that presented, who was also based in the same camp, in the same base as me. And I thought to myself, I'm going to go and see her, but I'm going to go and see her on the sly. I'm going to do it informally, because I don't believe in any of this. I'm a sergeant in the Special Forces, and it's embarrassing. I was embarrassed. So anyway, I went and saw her. I said, look, this needs to be off the record. I just have a few things that I need to address. And all I wanted to do was address the issues that I had. I obviously had issues. I admitted that sort of to myself. And so I can go back to work. And I thought that I was going to be given a huge toolbox of different things that we could try out until the one thing that worked. Unfortunately, well, I'll come to that in a minute. But we sat down, spoke informally, had a bit of a chat, felt all right about it, came away and sort of did this and continued my job, but was still had the black cloud looming in the distance, and still had basically lost my military mojo. And I kept going back to it, and the lady actually said in the end, she said, look, we need to make this a bit more formal. For me to help you, I need to make it more formal, document stuff, talk to a few people in the unit, so we can sort of move forward. And I was like, well, I want to move forward, but I don't want to talk to anyone else about it. I don't want to, in this alpha male environment, the Royal Marines, the Special Boat Service, whatever it is, you're expected to be strong and just get on with it. It's a case of just put up and shut up. So I reluctantly said yes. She spoke to a few people, and then it just snowballed. I got signed off work sick. I was prescribed antidepressants. I was told that I was going to then engage in CBT and a little bit of EMDR. Now, for me, it didn't work, and the reason it didn't work, and this is not me having a pop at the person that I was doing it with, the relationship, there was just no relationship. And because there was no relationship, and I didn't feel comfortable engaging with that person, and probably a bit vice versa, I could see that that person was getting frustrated with the lack of progress. And then I, in turn, was getting frustrated at the lack of progress and the frustration seen in that individual. So I sort of pulled away from it. I tried to continue with, I tried to get back into work, but they were like, no, you're not quite ready. And then I was getting told by other people in the profession, the mental health profession, whatever you want to call it, that the one thing that would work for me, the one thing that would fix me is to leave the military. That's it. The day you leave the military, that's you. You're done. You'll be sorted. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. But obviously they knew best. I fought it for a little bit. Things got worse. My relationship with my then wife just deteriorated terribly. It wasn't a nice time, and I then reverted back to this advice, leave the military. So I remember going into the office and I was like, look, let's pursue this. I need to fix myself. I need to get better. Let's get myself out of the military. So, I mean, it took about, from me saying that, probably took about 3-4 months, and that was me, done. 5th of April, I remember it was the 5th of April was my last day in the organisation. I had a little bit of a piss up, and then I woke up the next morning, and I woke up expecting to feel better, and I wasn't. I still had the same feelings. The black cloud had gone, but now I felt like I'd let myself down, let my mates down. I was embarrassed. When people asked me what I'd left the military for, I used to lie and say it was for my hearing. Everyone knew I had tinnitus and I had dodgy hearing, but I lied because I couldn't face up to the fact that I'd actually left because I was diagnosed with PTSD and chronic burnout. So that's really where the journey starts, to be honest. It was horrendous. I was hiding from my friends. I was arguing. I was basically failing. I'd failed at this one job, and then I was failing in life. And the key to fixing yourself, and this is yourself, obviously, but for me, what actually happened was I met Malcolm, and I met someone else as well, and between the two of them, they helped me come up with this, the one, obviously looking forward, Jamie's spoken about that, but the one thing that was more important to me than anything else was to be honest with myself and understand who I am. And that's the only thing that fixed me. Now, I was pretending to live a life. I was trying to live a life that everyone expected me to live, this normal life where I had a 9-to-5 job, I had a company car. It was destroying me. It was killing me. And I had to be honest with myself. And I had to make some decisions, and I did, and I left that job. Whilst this is going on, myself and Jamie obviously got to put our heads together. We'd obviously just left the military, the forces. And we did what squaddies do, what Marines do. We sat down and we just moaned our asses off. Oh, that was shit. This was, X, Y, and Z didn't work. They don't know their arse from the rubber, blah, blah, blah. Which is not the case, by the way. It's just us whinging. And we thought, well, why don't we do something about it? We didn't know what we were going to do. But we just wanted to do something that sort of bridged the gap, that brought it all together. And it is essentially that, Rock to Recovery. Jamie's the driving force. I can't take any credit for it. He's the brains of the outfit. But what it was is we did what we're trying to basically talk about what we did, which was essentially, in the end, although it was a long, drawn-out process, we stopped feeling sorry for ourselves to a certain degree. I always feel sorry for myself a little bit. Then we started to talk. Now, the first person you talk to might not be the right person, but you just need to know that at some point you will find the right person. Don't be downhearted by the fact that that one person isn't the right one. There's billions of people on the planet. Someone will be someone that you want to talk to. Then ACT, obviously, we've got Malcolm. He's the guy that helps. He's the one that acts, intervenes. It's an intervention coaching, I suppose. And that basically helps you help yourself to then find a refocus. Now, for me, I've got lots of different focuses, and I need lots of different focuses, and I understand that. I'm honest with myself. I know I need that. So I've got lots of different things going on. Rock to Recovery is one of them. And then obviously we go talking about mountains, music, and water. And then I went and did something ridiculous, and it involved water. So last year I rowed across the Atlantic. And it's sort of, the weird thing is it sounds horrendous, and it was. It was, honestly, it's like, but it does, it gave me a focus. It was something to focus on, and I will always make sure that I've got a focus, and I'll always make sure it involves one of those three things. At the same time, I'll make sure all I want to do in life is be happy, so I'll always do stuff that makes me happy. And that's how we come to Rock to Recovery. It was a long journey, or it seemed a long journey. It's quite quick, to be honest with you, when I look back on it. But yeah, that's basically my story. There's a lot more to it. There's going to be questions later. I'm happy to answer questions later. And we'll be talking about other bits and pieces later on as well. But yeah, that's essentially my experience with PTSD.
Thank you very much, both, for sharing your story with us today. I'm Thanos Karatzias. I'm professor of mental health here and director of research, and I'm doing quite a lot of work on PTSD. And I guess that what I would really like to speak briefly today is traumatic life events, the things that you have heard from Jamie and Foxy, what they are and where military trauma fits in all that. I would really like to cover a little bit, talk a little bit about the impact of life events on mental and physical health. Then classification, PTSD, and this new idea on complex PTSD, which will be included hopefully in the next ICD-11 to be published next year. And then a little bit on implications for services and trauma-informed care and some directions for future research. I've been informed that many of you are very well educated, so you would be interested to hear about all that. So psychological trauma, as you can see here on the slide, we have a number of different life events ranging from road traffic accidents, natural disasters, interpersonal violence, physical health. And when it comes to disasters, Scotland had her first share in the past. So a range of different things could be classified as psychological trauma. And if you look at the literature, what is being suggested is that most of us, more than 65 or 70%, would have been exposed during their lifetime to at least one of those life events. But we are not all getting ill as part of that. So why some people are getting ill and some not? I guess that what is changing after exposure to life events is that major assumptions that we have that this is about ourselves or about our world, that is a safe place. For example, just to give you an example, it's a very dramatic example, but you all came here on the assumption that this is a very safe place to be, and fair enough, please don't be alarmed, it is a safe place to be. But imagine for a moment, as the guys were saying earlier on, if something happens, okay? What would be the impact of that? And that is exactly what the impact is. Suddenly, your world is a different place and is not a safe place anymore. So looking into life events across different populations, this is a community treatment seeking plan. And there is no point in going into all the different life events. But this is a trauma population. Of course, they would have been exposed to a number of different things. But what is really, really interesting in this slide is that this, on the left-hand side, you have or left-hand side on me? Yeah, left-hand side on you as well, childhood life events. On the right-hand side, you have the adulthood life events. On the right-hand side, what is really, really interesting is that childhood trauma only is 0%. And whereas adulthood trauma only is 16.4%. And childhood and adulthood trauma is 82.1%. What does this tell us? If you look into a trauma population, it would be quite unlikely that you would find someone who has been exposed only to one traumatic life event, and most people would have been exposed to both. So this is a treatment-seeking population. A prison population, a very vulnerable population, exactly the same picture. Those with childhood trauma would also tend to present with adulthood trauma. And apparently, childhood trauma would create a vulnerability for further exposure to adulthood life events. In the military population, there are some data. There is not much that has been done. However, there is now evidence to suggest that childhood trauma is the second most common type of trauma experienced, again, in a treatment-seeking population. okay? So combat stress would be perhaps, in most cases, the referring problem. But if you look into the history, as Jamie said earlier on, you would find this accumulation of different life events. And this accumulation, Jamie described it really, really nicely with the analogy of the glass and filling it with water. But then if you think about how we help the population to move forward, there is another interesting statistic that there is there, that treatment non-completion was associated with childhood trauma. So if you have someone who had both combat stress plus childhood trauma, people who had both, they were more likely not to complete treatment and then get into all sorts of other issues, as we have heard earlier on. So what is the story with childhood trauma? Is it more serious than adulthood trauma? Apparently it is. Unfortunately, it is. On the left-hand side, again, you have the adulthood life events, disasters, accidents, death of a loved one, or interpersonal violence. And the common conditions that are being associated with these adulthood life events are PTSD, depression, anxiety, and substance misuse. On the right-hand side, you have childhood life events. And as you can see, I mean, the list is far more longer. And apparently, there is no single condition, issue, behavioral, or social problem that has not been linked to childhood trauma. And apparently, we know now that if we were able to eradicate childhood trauma altogether, we would have 30% less mental health problems in the world. 30%. I mean, that is quite an impressive statistic. So why childhood trauma is more severe? In case that people are getting apprehensive, I won't talk about statistics. I mean, that's my world. I'm doing quite a lot of that, but I'm just going to show you some graphs to demonstrate a few points. And what this work shows is that up to very recently, we thought that if someone had experienced childhood trauma, that would have an impact on certain aspects of his psyche. In that case, cognitive schemas. Cognitive schemas are basic cognitive structures that we are using to organize memories and information. And what this very fancy graph shows is that for those who have experienced childhood trauma, there is an impact across all those different schemas. And apparently, you get two groups of people. You get those who the impact is more severe, and people whose impact is less severe. But the key point here is that there is impact across all the different areas. So no surprise then that childhood adversity leads to a number of adverse outcomes in adulthood. For example, more recent work that we did here in Edinburgh Napier suggests that those who have experienced both childhood and adulthood trauma, they tend to commit their first offense at an earlier age. And when they do, that is more severe than those with no childhood or adulthood trauma. We also know that if childhood trauma is associated with self-harm through different mechanisms. And we also know that it is associated with violent offending and drug use. So lots of negative outcomes, mostly behavioral. But when people are thinking about mental health and trauma, they're thinking about impact on mental health. And we have heard Jamie earlier on talking about physical health. Apparently, physical health following exposure to traumatic events is really there is a deterioration. And we know, for example, that those who have experienced, or they report that they have experienced trauma, they report more severe physical health. And in this particular population-based study in Hong Kong, we found that the more life events someone reports, the more likely they are to report poor physical health, especially so for heart disease. And the press picked this up and they talked about broken hearts. So that's your evidence for broken hearts. In the military, it is exactly the same story. Those who report they have experienced combat stress or they suffer from traumatic stress, either as a result of engagement with going to operations or other life events, they are more likely to present with hypertension, circulatory problems, digestive problems, and neurological problems as well. So physical health is big in trauma. So traumatic stress can take many forms, including depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance misuse, medically unexplained symptoms, and especially with men who are in the army or in the forces, you wouldn't necessarily expect to see what we call post-traumatic stress disorder as the presenting problem. And Jamie and I and some others went for dinner yesterday, and we were laughing about it. I mean, when you have an issue like that and you're going to your GP to ask for help, you can't really, you are not reporting, oh, by the way, I tend to think about that quite a lot. What are the presenting reasons? Why people are going to their GP? They're going to their GP because they feel very low, because they might be having a problem with alcohol, or they have all these unexplained physical health problems. But what is really, really important here is that those who are survivors of psychological trauma, they present with more than one of those. So it's not just one thing. And the presentations are quite complex. Where do we really start if we want to help them? And this is a very simplistic kind of model of thinking about trauma, thinking about the different comorbidities. Apparently, if you identify trauma early enough and do something about it, that would have a knock-on effect on mental health, and that, in so doing, that would have a knock-on effect on physical health as well. However, this is the case if you pick up that early. Apparently, we know that it takes about 7 years to access appropriate services following psychological trauma. And the bad thing with trauma is the more you leave it untreated, the more complicated and complicating it gets. So thinking about this trauma kind of business, how, and all these different conditions that has been associated, clearly an important question is, what are the core symptoms that best describe traumatic distress so they can be picked up during a consultation, and how traumatic stress can be distinguished from other disorders. This is actually quite, from a clinical perspective, is a really, really important question. At the moment, there are about 7 different models of traumatic stress, okay? And if you just take the same population and apply all these different models, in this particular work, what we found is that prevalence rates of PTSD across the models can range from 65% to 84%, okay? That might be just a statistic here, but the reality is that would mean whether you're diagnosed or not with a condition. And diagnosis is important from the point of view that it means that you can access appropriate help and you can access appropriate interventions. So if you are not getting the right diagnosis, then access to appropriate treatments is compromised. And the other thing from in my world, in research world, if we do not know exactly what we are treating, then how are we going to treat it? How we are going to develop new interventions to help people with traumatic stress. Very interestingly, this is the case with the military personnel as well. Many of you would know that a new DSM was introduced a couple of years ago, and that describes the PTSD condition. And I will talk a little bit later on what that looks like. But what is interesting here is that we now have DSM-5. If you get exactly the same population from DSM-4 to DSM-5, 30% of soldiers who meet DSM-4 criteria for PTSD do not meet criteria for DSM-5 PTSD. That means, again, you are missing 30% of people. We are not diagnosing them. We are not offering them appropriate support. So for people who are not familiar with classifications, we have two major classification systems. The DSM-5, the DSM, which is the American system, and the ICD, which is the World Health Organization classification system. DSM-5 PTSD, DSM-5 describes PTSD as a condition of 4 core symptoms: the experience of the event through nightmares or through cognitions, avoidance of any reminders of the event, hyperarousal, and emotional dysregulation. DSM-5 and ICD were mirroring each other for years, for all the different iterations. However, for the very first time, there are now proposals for the ICD to differentiate completely from DSM. And the current proposals are that ICD will introduce a new condition, which is called complex PTSD. So according to the proposals for the next ICD, PTSD would be a condition of 3 clusters of symptoms: re-experience, avoidance, hyperarousal. And we know from our own work that this is most likely associated with a single life event in adulthood, like road traffic accidents. And a complex PTSD, which would be a condition of these 3 clusters of symptoms of PTSD, plus 3 additional clusters of symptoms that include emotional dysregulation, like displays of anger, interpersonal difficulties, and pervasive low self-esteem. Many of those things, I think you can relate back to Jamie's and Foxy's presentations earlier on. So PTSD would be a condition of 3 clusters of symptoms, and complex PTSD would be a condition of 6 clusters of symptoms. We did here in Edinburgh the first study in the world of complex PTSD, and we found evidence that that does exist and is a good model of describing traumatic distress. But what is really interesting is that when you look at the 2 conditions, PTSD and complex PTSD, is that 76% in this particular sample had complex PTSD and 24% had simple PTSD. So complex PTSD is far more common in a trauma population, any trauma population, than simple PTSD. We have also developed a new scale called ICD-TQ, and again, we did here in this university the first standardization study of the scale, and it looks very, very promising in terms of reliability and validity. So let's move a little bit and go into the treatment. We talked a little bit about classification. We talked about assessment. How do we help someone with PTSD, complex PTSD, or with traumatic distress more generally? And I'm sure that you have heard from Jamie and Foxy that the standard treatments that are offered for traumatic stress are EMDR and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and eye movement desensitization, the reprocessing. This is what is being, this is the recommendation in the NICE guidelines. And for those who are not very familiar with the models, is that these interventions are tackling avoidance. I mean, if you remember, one of the core features of the condition is avoidance. So what we are asking people to do is to go back to the event in a very safe environment, and we are exposing them to the traumatic material. And in so doing, when this is flashing in their minds after that process, they won't be so stressed when they're thinking about it. So that brings habituation to the traumatic stress, and this is how the memory is being processed. Both interventions are equally effective for PTSD, and they are both superior than waiting list. So it is best if you do something as opposed to not do anything, and they're both equally effective. And again, we know this from our work here. However, there is a little problem with the evidence base. All evidence that we have about traumatic stress today is based on DSM for PTSD, which most likely results from one single traumatic life event that occurs predominantly in adulthood. And as we have seen already from the earlier evidence that I have presented to you, the population is different. The population has accumulative stress. The population would have like a big glass, even far more bigger glass than Jamie's earlier on. It's no wonder then, I think, that we are applying the wrong treatments in most cases. And for that reason, there is at least a 50% dropout. There is only a 40% recovery rates, even after accounting for dropout rates. There is lots of chronicity. And again, differences between treatments are the same, so it's not just a superior over the other. So I think what we need to do is perhaps we need to rethink traumatic stress, and we need to think how we are approaching this in terms of treatment. And this is perhaps, again, a very simplistic way to think about traumatic stress, but that's what the evidence suggests. Most people would have been exposed to childhood life events. That would, in addition to adulthood life events, and that accumulation of different events would most likely lead to complex PTSD. However, there is no clear cut between the two. You might be a survivor of a single life event, and you might still present with more complex presentations. But most people would fit quite nicely in that kind of model. But what is interesting here in complex PTSD is these three additional clusters of symptoms: the emotional dysregulation, the pervasive low self-esteem, and the interpersonal problems that create additional social problems, educational, financial, or of different kinds of problems that we know, not just military personnel, but people who, survivors of trauma across experience. And apparently, what we are most likely to see in clinical practice are these social issues that are stemming from these complex PTSD symptoms. So what are the current and future challenges and opportunities for trauma services, including Army services? I mean, clearly we need to do something about engagement and retention. We need to find appropriate treatments for complex PTSD. We have the core principles, I think, there, but how we repackage this into an intervention from a clinical perspective, I don't think that we are there yet. There is some work to be done when it comes to thinking of trauma from an organizational perspective. And childhood trauma is associated with quite a lot of stigma. It's really, really difficult to talk about that, and especially if you look into childhood trauma in male-dominated environments like the Army or the other services, for men, it is quite difficult to raise or talk about those issues. We need to think about patient preferences as well. I mean, we know from our work on trauma that if you match a person with their preferred intervention, then you are most likely to achieve a better outcome. But again, from a clinical perspective, we all need to think how we work as clinicians in a more person-centered and more flexible manner. There are also some other key points when we are thinking complex PTSD in particular. The effects of trauma are very heterogeneous. That means that the two people who are being exposed to exactly the same thing would react completely differently. There is no such a thing as one size fits all. So even if we are talking about PTSD, complex PTSD classification of traumatic stress, we always need to think that, we are talking about humans, and humans could have possibly their own ways of externalizing their traumatic stress. But the key point here is to think of distress as a result of what happened to people as opposed to what's wrong with them. The EMDR and CBT approaches, I mean, the core principles are there for complex PTSD, but I think they should be repackaged in a different kind of way to minimize the dropout rates. The thing is that if you are multiply traumatized and someone takes you to these childhood events without any preparation first, then most likely that would result in a dropout. People find it extremely difficult to go to this earlier memory, and patient preference, there is nothing there as yet. So we've done quite a lot of work in community samples. I think that the agenda, the future agenda, the research agenda on complex PTSDs look into the forces and see whether this PTSD and complex PTSD diagnoses, how relevant are they from, and how they are related to combat stress as well. We are doing international field studies. We need more of those. There is one in the States we are doing at the moment, but hopefully we will do further work in the future. And I'm quite interested in models of care. I think that we need to change perhaps the way that we are thinking about how we help people, and perhaps what we were doing so far, diagnosis, 10 sessions of CBT, MDR out of the door next might not be the best way. I mean, as we have heard, most people are chronic, they need ongoing support. They have a number of issues, not necessarily only mental health or physical health. Social problems we've heard about, interpersonal problems, and so on and so forth. And the treatment of complex PTSD certainly sits very highly on my own personal research agenda. I would really like to finish this talk today with a few lines that were written here by Sassoon in 1917 in this very historic campus, the Craiglockhart Campus. And to me, what this highlights is that traumatic stress in the military is not a new concept, it's not a new idea. I mean, we've known about this for quite some time. We might still try to find the best ways to do something about it, but has been there long enough. So just a few moments for you to read through. And thank you all very much for your attention. I believe we have a question and answer session.
Good morning, everyone. Morning. I'm sure, just like me, you were all utterly transfixed and really quite moved by what we've seen and heard this morning. I've got a number of questions that I would really like to ask the speakers, but I will save it for over tea and coffee. I'll give the privilege of the questions to the audience, so we've got time for about 3 or 4 questions. So while you think about that as an audience member, can I ask Jamie, Jason and Thanos to have a seat?
Yeah, is that what they're for? I did want
So who would like to ask the first question? We've got some roving mics. We've got a question here.
Hello there, my name's Dee Affleck. Thanos, I was really glad that you sort of raised the point that most of the evidence base is on single traumas, single adult traumas, because I think that was a very important point to raise. And I was just trying to link together what Jamie and Foxy had said in relation to future research. Because my concern is that, you know, we use reductionist models of trying to understand, you know, very human processes. And I was very interested in Jamie's comment about, you know, sort of alternative therapies, because I mean, I would use the phrase innovative treatments, innovative ways of working. Because I think that when you try to apply an understanding using what basically is from a computer metaphor of mind, you know, this idea of assumptions that representations somehow get lodged into the thought process system, I think it worries me because it's quite a reductionist way of looking at it. And I think that we have to be thinking in terms, especially when we link in, you know, the sort of the tables that you were showing about childhood traumas as well, that these are relational memories and they're internalized rather than representations. So I think the CBT sort of conceptualization of it comes at it from a reductionist sort of viewpoint. So it was really just to sort of share that thought with you, because I think that the key points that I'd taken from both Jamie and Foxy's sort of very personal comments were, I think one of the things that you had both mentioned was the idea of self. Jamie, when you were talking about the realization for you that what you were doing in your role as a sniper didn't fit with your personality. So there's something very poignant about the structure of self that you have internalized and developed, and you know how that then came at odds with your role in the military. And I think, Foxy, you also mentioned something about doing it for yourself, and you know, sort of the sort of sense of self for you. So it's just really a reflection around that for you to think about.
Can I just give a brief response to that? I mean, thank you for the point you're making. I mean, I can't agree more with what you said. And for what it means, I'm not arguing here that what I have presented with the complex PTSD is the best way forward. I'm appreciative that there are more things to be done. But to me, the reason that I have supported this idea is that for the very first time, we are deviating from that model of thinking of traumatic stress as a very simple kind of condition. And for the very first time, we appreciate complexity. And to me, that is, I mean, you've been yourself in that area for long enough to know is great victory. More to be done, more symptoms to be included, more to look into, you know, how all that fits together. Dissociation, for example, is a big kind of, or borderline personality. These are all big questions. But the fact that for the very first time we deviate from this very simplistic DSM model, to me that is great news.
Yeah, and we need to do that.
Yeah.
Mental health is geared around this idea of symptom-focused treatment.
Absolutely.
Which, you know, it puts into question what we pick up.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think what you're highlighting is that often in research and clinical treatments, we use simplistic approaches to very complicated issues. I don't know if Jamie or Jason wants to come back on that in relation to the therapies and treatments that you offer through Rock to Recovery. Do you see that as alternative or complementary to the more traditional approaches?
Definitely complementary. The client base we have tends to be guys that are either in a long waiting list to go and try the classical routes. They can wait 5-6 months. And that's 5 or 6 months of talking about suicide regularly. And there's nothing, so they're on the list, they've got the appointment, but they've got a long wait for it. And then the other group is the guys that have been and done what the doctors recommended, and we always recommend that first. You know, you've got to go, and we want it to work. We want that to be the end of the story for us. But what happens is some of them come out of that system having been discharged because there wasn't a success, or they didn't get on, or whatever it was. And then it's a what now? And I'm seeing, so we've worked in the 2.5 years we've been running with over 100 clients now, and I'm the first point of contact as the lead welfare guy. And I pass on the actual coaching to our head of coaching, Malcolm, who's sat over there. And between the 4 of them, they distribute across the UK sessions and allocate their time. So I've been in this, arguably 11 years of understanding it, working in this recovery area for the last 2 or 3. But the coaches that we employ have been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. And out of that 100, if we say it was 100, it won't be, but imagine it was 100 exactly, I've not seen 2 cases identical, 2 live stories identical. I've not seen 2 of anything identical. And you can't apply, I would love to, but you can't apply the same thing for everyone. And what we say is, if standing the man over here and everyone throws a raw egg at him works, then I'll sell eggs.
You're an
That's it's what works.
That's why I think we have to be very careful with the off-the-shelf treatments.
Yeah. It's about what works.
They may be clinically, they're not clinically effective. You know, they may have clinical efficacy, but there is a difference. So yeah, I think you're right. You have to have individualised treatments.
Okay. Any other questions? I think there was one here.
Hello, my name is Shona McIntosh, and I'd like to echo Dee's response and thanks to Thanos and the gentlemen for sharing their stories. But I'm really interested in the alternative complementary therapies, and my question is really about future research for the 3 of you, wandering around for the mountains and music and other aspects of your treatments, how you might look at locus of control and self-efficacy as part of those underpinning the psychological well-being, which might well be feeding into the interpersonal difficulties and the pervasive low self-esteem, which is part of the complex PTSD.
So the question's really about future research. So I'll get Thanos to answer that first while Jamie and Jason gather their thoughts about that.
Yeah, thank you, Shona, for the question. I think that there are two things here. There is the symptoms and there is well-being. I think that psychological therapies would more likely to tackle symptoms, and that's how we are doing research. We apply psychological therapy and we investigate how that would have an effect on symptomatology. For me, I think there is a place for every intervention, for alternative interventions like engagement with music or sports or other social activities. I think where the evidence is at the moment is because there is not much out there, is more about general well-being and perhaps stabilization, which, as you know yourself really well, especially for trauma, is really, really important. So it's more about general well-being as opposed to symptom reduction. But again, future research is open. All that should be addressed. I mean, it's an important question.
Jamie, Jason?
For me, so we talk about the mountains, music and all that, that's not the therapy. The intervention by people like Malcolm and the coaches that we have out there, that's the therapy. They're the people that are, they're trained in that. When I think there's been a bit of a disjoint when we talk about it's about, so basically when you go through these, you go through the trauma of experienced PTSD, whatever it is, complex PTSD, you break down as an individual and you go from being someone who's active, does everything that they want to do and is good at what they do, as an example. And then something happens, and then they go into the phase, the 6-month phase where on a waiting list maybe. And that's when they need to, we talked about stopping and acting, and that's the acting. So, and that can involve anything. Obviously, we talk about CBT, EMDR, whatever it is that works for that person. That's the intervention side. For us, the mountains, music, and water is where you refocus. It's where you're essentially becoming fixed. And then you need to refocus again. We all need a focus in life, and we all need something to focus on. So the end result isn't a therapy. It's continuing with life. It's looking forward. It's being a human being. We're all human.
How much of it you think is linked to goal setting?
It's all linked. Yeah.
Huge.
I mean, whatever your goal is, whether it's a goal of I want to make X amount of money, or I just want to be happy in life. What's your goal? Have that over in the distance, continually have that goal, and then deal with life as it happens.
So music, mountains, and water, what we found are the environments. They're the places to go and do the work, is what we find in. And then dealing with each client individually at a coaching level is what the experts that work for us and with us do for us. In fact, if I could invite Malcolm, would you, I know I've put you on the spot, explain a little bit about that coaching, being the expert for us.
Told to stand up. So, can you? So, kind of answering a bit of Jamie's explanation there. We do coaching and interventions, but there has to be something after that. Thanos, you talked about social implications, forgetting how to make friends, forgetting how to communicate, or never having learned if you've gone through a childhood that prevented those learnings. The activities that Jamie's talking about reintroduce people, sometimes for the first time and sometimes a reintroduction, to getting connected again, which is a vital aspect of recovery. With regard to the coaching, Jason, you said, the first person you went to for help, you didn't want to criticize them, but you couldn't relate to them. At Rock to Recovery, we like the old saying, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. It is not breaking boundaries to get close to the person that you are working with. it is breaking boundaries to get close to their problem and take that on board. And so that makes a difference with the way that we work. The coaching itself, we talked about EMDR, which I know can be very effective for many people, but we tend to follow the language of feelings, i.e. that will guide us to where the work needs to take place. And so we still do use an ID sensitization technique, but with a slightly different front end. And I personally find that more effective, but that's just my opinion. Jamie, we've done more than 100 veterans. You've just lost count. It's,
You can't count.
we're a little higher. But, so I don't know what else you want me to answer, but I'm happy to talk if anyone's got a question.
Can I add just a very, very brief point? Trauma is a condition that takes you back to the past, and although you are in the present moment, your mind is in the past. And all these activities, what these guys are doing here, are really, really important just to keep you grounded and on the present moment. And from that can open up possibilities for therapy or interventions in the future. It's really, really important to find a way to stay in the present moment.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Jane Sutherland. I'm an occupational therapist, and just like you've described, and thanks for sharing your life events that happened to you. We're the same as occupational therapists. We're focused on helping people identify the activities that help them move on in their life and recover, and set goals and try and help people move on. I agree. I agree. Psychological therapy is vital, but I think other activities help people move on in their life and give them purpose and meaning and hope again. And so I think your project sounds very interesting.
Thank you.
So thank you.
So let me just add my thanks to the speakers for this morning, and before we draw to a close, particular thanks to Jamie and Jason for sharing your personal life experiences and how you've accessed therapies and how you've responded to that and taken us through your recovery. And also it's really quite admirable what you've done in relation to using your own experiences to help others, so setting up Rock to Recovery with Malcolm and others. I hope that you have lots of success with that. It sounds like you've helped an awful lot of people, and I'm sure you will do in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks to Thanos Karatzias for insight in relation to the sort of clinical and academic side of PTSD, and also highlighting that symptoms are not always about mental ill health, but can present with physical ill health as well, and linking the fact that military personnel might well have been exposed to previous trauma, and that can present as complex PTSD. And we wish you every success in relation to getting that complex PTSD recognised as an international classification of disease next year. I hope that's successful. Thanks to Dan Elliott and Andrew Weir for the play that we watched and heard earlier. It was incredibly moving, and it just highlights that this symptoms of PTSD have been around for a very long time. They've just been called different things, haven't they? It was probably known as shell shock many, many years ago, and that many people have been exposed to that. Hopefully now, with raised awareness and better diagnosis, we can actually help these people get more timely and effective access to treatment. But it sounds like we've got a long way to go in relation to research and clinical therapies.